The passionate leader. Because leadership without passion is just a title.
Meeting. We got a collapse in the garage. Get the squad back living in here. We got an IV gone to a firefighter. It's on island urgent. Transmit a second aloft.
Hey everybody, it's JP with The Passionate Leader. Welcome to the episode, and on today's episode we have a super special guest. It is my fire service giant and the man who single-handedly started my fire service career out. He is the individual to which every day when I make a decision I wonder what would Matt do. What is his name, you might ask? His name is Matt Wilson. He is a retired fire chief from the town of Chester, Vermont. He faithfully served that community for 28 years, holding every rank from chief all the way down to probationary firefighter. That was not enough for him. After 12 years of serving in the United States Army, he also enlisted and became a full-time police officer for the town of Chester as well. So he was single-handedly both on the fire and the police side of the world. This guy did it all. He's now hung it up, and it's time to get some good nuggets from him. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a grandfather, and when he's not here doing things for us or making this fire service better in other ways, he's out hunting, fishing, out on the lake in northern Vermont, and just kicking his feet back and relaxing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor to introduce you to retired Fire Chief Matt Wilson of the Chester Vermont Fire Department.
Thank you, JP.
Awesome. Before I get started, is there anything that you would like to add to that lengthy bio? Anything that I said wrong or anything that I might have missed?
I think you hit it.
Thanks, bud. So listen, I'll be very honest. When I knew I was going to do a podcast, you were the first person that came to mind. It was immediate. And I meant everything that I said. You are the reason that I still wear the uniform today. And because you can't be out of it, even when we're here today. So one of the reasons I want to bring you on is your involvement with the Fire Explorers program, because that obviously is how I got my start in the fire service. And I know before we started recording, I mentioned that I won't have a lot of time the next week, and this year I'm actually going to be helping a really good friend of mine. The cadet academy that I went to when I was on the Explorers that Vermont does, New Hampshire has one as well, and I will be up there for a whole week doing the same thing that some mentors did for me when I was a kid. So it's an honor to be able to kind of give back to the community that really shaped my career. So why don't you kind of walk me through your fire service career and then kind of how you got into leading the Fire Explorers?
Yeah, so when I got back from the Army, I like to serve, and firefighting seemed to be the path, and there was a local fire department here in town. So I signed up for that and made my way up through the ranks. But as I was making my way through the ranks, there was just a lot of things that seemed like they could improve in our department. One being personnel. There wasn't a lot. Our roster looked good, but for the people that were on that roster, they just really didn't participate. So there was only probably, 5 to 8 people that actually responded to calls, and the town of Chester, although small, was a busy town, and we needed more help. So I always had a passion for kids and helping young ones, and I just kind of racked my brain of how could we make the department stronger and at the same time help the kids in town. So I went to the town manager at the time and the fire chief at the time and proposed starting a junior fire department. There was a little pushback on that from some of the old timers that were on the department that were set in their ways and weren't really into it. And so I had to agree that I was going to run it. They were really going to have no involvement in it. And so we went to the town manager and initially got denied because the town's insurance wouldn't cover it. But I generally don't let things go when I'm passionate about something. So I did some more digging and found the Fire Explorer program, or the Explorer program, which is sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America, and they have different entities within that you can start Explorer program with, and firefighting was one of them. And through them, for I don't know what the fees are anymore, but 20 some odd years ago, I think it was like $10 a person for the program, and the Boy Scouts of America picked up all the insurance coverage to start the program. So I went and re-proposed it to the town, gave them all the documentation. Once they reviewed it, they approved it, and we were off running.
That's now how long, years wise did it kind of take you to get the program from you're thinking about starting it to actually finally getting the assembly at the high school that day?
So getting the assembly going and stuff didn't take that long. I'm a pretty impatient person when I'm passionate about something, and
Oh, I witness firsthand.
so I wanted it and I wanted it bad. I think from getting it approved by the town, it probably was a year. From them actually giving me the go ahead to being in the school, I would say within a couple of months. I had an idea. I had a plan, an action plan written out of how I wanted to do it. And we made the appointment with the school. School was great. They thought it was great to get some of the services in the school. And we got it going. I would say within a couple of months, and I would say within a couple months of after being in the school, we probably had our first meeting and started to do stuff. As far as getting the program where I wanted it to be, I would say a couple of years to get it running how I wanted it to run.
Oh man, that's awesome. I gotta tell you, I owe everything to this Explorers post that you started. It's really what's kept me in this fire service. It's you, it's that. And I remember we just moved back to town. I moved to Chester after living in Bells Falls for a little bit. We moved around a lot as kids, and truthfully, it was something that I brought home a little pamphlet, and Mom looked, and she's like, "Hey, why don't you give it a shot?" And I haven't really regretted any moment of it. But I mean, naturally, I can certainly guess that there's probably going to be some pushback from some of the members in the department. And how did you handle that? And as far as the pushback, what did you do to keep moving through the pushback?
Well, definitely not going to throw out any names, but
Yes, no names. So protect the
I
innocent.
will I will definitely say I think there was a majority of the department that was against it.
Okay.
There was a lot of changes that needed to be made in our department as far as old school thinking and not wanting things to change. Things that were allowed in the department that shouldn't have been allowed probably at the time and definitely would not be allowed today.
Yep.
That had to change before we brought young adults into the station. And that was a huge pushback. I think that went on for quite a while. I guess like any job, the program and the young adults themselves had to prove themselves that they were an asset and that the asset outweighed the changes that they didn't want in the department.
Which I mean, it's you see it even now. I mean, and I know eventually. One of the reasons, again, there's a plethora of reasons why I'm doing this kind of stuff, but it's to keep myself passionate about the fire service because I know there's going to be things that I don't want to evolve and change to that the fire service just has to. So if I stay relevant and I kind of remain passionate about what I do and I talk with folks like yourself and all this, it keeps me away from becoming that complacent bottom feeder that doesn't want to move forward in the fire service. And there are things that I've caught myself, with the whole "we've always done it that way" thing, and it's kind of scary. But honestly, I mean, the Explorers program ran for what was it? I mean, how many years did it run for?
Well, it ended in a terrible way. I think I want to say it was around 8 years that it went on.
Yep. I mean but that's 8 years, and I promise you that you made a difference in the fire service. And I know there's a lot of departments. Whether they wanted to admit it back in the day, I'm sure they saw that what was going on with our post, and they could see the positive difference for sure. And I think again, the Explorers are where it's at. We've looked at it with my department now a while ago, and the problem being is it's a time commitment. What's really fun now is I have a lieutenant who serves underneath me that he reminds me a lot of myself, who also reminds me a lot about the very, very tenacious. If there is there's no black and there's no gray area. It's always black and white with him, and he he's passionate. And sometimes you got to rein the passion in a little bit because it kind of kick get us in trouble a little bit. But
Well, the Explorer program definitely it took off. We shaped a lot of departments by doing that. There was definitely pushback from surrounding towns too about having young adults on scenes and having to prove that we had control, and that one, they were going to be a liability to the public or property, but
yeah,
also liability to themselves. But once we proved that, the phone calls that I started getting from surrounding towns asking how we did this, how it was set up, and other departments trying to do it themselves, was amazing. There was tons of departments around southern Vermont that were like, wow, this is really working for them. Not only does it help them, but it's shaping the department for the future. We were starting kids off at 13, 14 years old, and by the time they turned 18 to where they could actually be hired, they were fully trained and ready to go. And yeah, a lot of people didn't stick around, but if we trained 10 people and I kept 2 of them after the 4 years to add to the department, then it was a huge recruiting and retention tool.
no, and I know a lot of departments nowadays are switching back to the. I'm not sure if it's an insurance rate thing or if it's more of a control, but it sounds like a lot of departments are switching away from the explorers post, but still keeping it as a junior fire department.
So in Vermont, I know they changed. I don't know if it was laws or just how it was done, but they changed stuff, and I actually changed it a few years before I retired. The Explorer program, you had to have a minimum amount of kids to be able to be allowed to be a program, and we just didn't have that in Chester anymore, which is why the program ended up getting done, because we didn't meet the Boy Scouts criteria. But in Vermont anyway, the rules changed of how young you could hire people, and then obviously there's a difference of whether you're a paid department or you're a volunteer department, what rules you have to follow. But as a paid department, we were allowed to hire people at 16 years old. So yeah, it wasn't as young as what it was prior to, but we were still getting to start some people off at 16, and the rules behind what they were allowed to do was amazing. Technically, by the rules at the time, I don't know what it is anymore, but at the time, I could take a 16-year-old into a burning building, but I wasn't allowed to let him climb a ladder, which didn't make any sense to me. But anyway, so no, there's a lot, and one of our neighboring departments, who was our first company in Proctorsville, they have an amazing junior program that feeds them constantly, and they run it well, and they don't have to follow quite as many rules because they're volunteer, but the training that they do with these kids, it's great for the service, but even if you don't get them, I mean, if you're keeping the kids from getting out of trouble and keeping them motivated to do something, it's well worth it.
No, amen. And honestly, I'm gonna try to get Bob on the show too, because I know that they've got something going on up there, that whether it's this magic well of kids that just are grown into the fire service, but it seems like they're doing pretty good. So I'm gonna try to get him on the show as well. This could be a little bit more of a tougher question, but what is one of your more memorable moments as far as leading? And it could be positive, negative, whatever the case is. But what is one of the more memorable moments that sticks out for you?
Are we still talking about the Explorers, or just in general throughout my career?
Yeah, no, for the Explorers. We'll get to the career in a little bit.
So sometimes you got to break rules, and you don't mean to break rules. But you have to weigh life safety.
Yep.
And sometimes you're just put in a position that you don't. You're either not doing something, or you break the rules and get it done and deal with the repercussions afterwards. And there was a very bad accident that happened that ended up being a fatal. And this was a couple years into it, and you guys were all very well trained at that point in time. You knew what you were doing. For the listeners, we trained you on stuff that you weren't allowed to use in the field, but we were allowed to train you on it. We just couldn't let you do it in a real life setting. And this bad accident happened, and I was the only firefighter that showed up except for Explorers. and you guys had to deal with this fatal, which was an extrication. It was a very, very hard call. And there was definitely, we treated it just like we would any call with after action stuff. Um, but how you guys all composed yourself during the incident, still amazes me to this day that you guys were so young. You went there, we did our job. Uh, Nobody on that call at that particular time would have known that you were all juniors. They would have thought you guys were all senior vets. It didn't think about it when it was actually happening, but to reflect on it afterwards and to see how everybody handled themselves on the call, how their training kicked in, it was amazing.
No, I mean but it speaks wonders to what you put together for a program too. So don't ever take that for granted, because my formative years, everybody's formative years, were done during that Explorers post, and the stuff that I still do today. I mean, I know during your retirement, I brought up the story about the frickin' 4-inch that I tripped and eat shit on up in Saxon's River. I still to this day cannot walk past a hose that's charged and not bring me right back to that day. I was 14 years old, maybe at the oldest, and you're like, don't run on the fire scene. So I didn't. I walked with passion, and apparently I walk with enough purpose to trip over a 4-inch hose. So to this day, I still can't. So I mean, the lasting impression that you and everybody else that was, the advisors of that post, you guys did good. I think it's probably the last one for the Explorers that I have for questions is, what was the most rewarding moment, or some of the more rewarding moments or experiences you had as the Explorers post leader?
I got to tell you, I think the most rewarding didn't happen during the Explorers. It happened later on in life. Look at you and I right now. You're sitting here interviewing me. You how you've gone through the service and have moved up through the ranks and things like that. One of my original explorers is now the chief of Ludlow. There's there in not even just fire service, but it's extra amazing to see him continue in the fire service, and not just continue, but thrive in the fire service and move up through the ranks and be leaders themselves now. But even the kids at the time that didn't continue on in the fire service, but still thrived in their life of their career choice that they did. Knowing that I get to be a part of that is beyond rewarding.
That's awesome, and it's so true. So during the intake, one of the questions I put on there was, some of your life lessons that you learned, and you had mentioned that during your first year as a fire chief, you'd kind of realized you didn't maybe position or mentor the juniors a little bit, as much as you should have. So when was it that you realized it, and how did you go about addressing that?
So when I was hired as the fire chief, it was hired to rebuild the program. So a lot of things changed in the 14 years that I was the chief. In that, one of the things that changed was that we were a paid department, and you had to 100% follow the town guidelines and rules and regs, which meant that there was annual job evaluations that had to be done on every employee that was there. And so when I went in, there was people that left. There was quite a few new hires that happened over the course of that year. But I would say it was within the first year or two, I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was two people that had been promoted to lieutenant's positions. And they were not happening the way I had hoped they were not coming along the way I'd hoped they had come along.
Sure.
And after we had done the written evaluations, we always sat down with everyone, and then kind of offline, I would sit down with them with at least one of the other officers and just kind of have a human-to-human conversation, and say, what the hell, should I get off the pot? And one of the gentlemen that was a lieutenant, I said, I really thought you would be further along, in your decision making and so on. Something has to change. And he called me out on it, and good for him. He said, "You're absolutely right, Chief. Something does need to change." He goes, "How do you expect us to get better if you don't ever trust us at a call, even if it's a small call, to be in charge of that call? How are we
Sure.
supposed to learn to run the scene? If you're there, you run the call." And he goes, "You don't micromanage us. You just don't ever turn command over to us to give us a shot to actually do it." And I looked at my deputy chief at the time, and I was like, "Wow, did I just get put in my place?" And they are 1,000,000% correct. I'm
Yep.
like, how are they supposed to get better? And again, it wasn't a micromanaging thing. I never, it could be the smallest call in the world, and I was there, so I would just run the call. And I was like, wow, I need to step back at these smaller calls and stuff, and just be like, hey, I'm just a fly on a wall here. This is your call. Run it. If you have a question, I'm here. Come ask me. But you need to run the call. So that was a huge learning point for me. That, if I wanted to have my officers, which we got there, be a place where I could leave for vacation or whatever and not worry about the place and know the place was in good hands, then I needed to trust them and start watching them grow and giving them the opportunity to grow. So I got there. It just didn't realize it at the time, but it was a good lesson learned.
Well, at first it takes humility, and some people just don't have that level of self-awareness and humility. And I can tell you flat out that it wasn't just you that has that problem. That it's a systemic thing. I think sometimes people see that a fire chief has to be the one in charge of the scene, and whether it be a multi-alarm structure fire, a simple pin job at a car accident, or I mean, Christ, even in a smells and bells call. We're learning it. I can tell you right now that it boils down to we have chiefs that go direct to the scene here, and sometimes it's just go to the station. Let the on duty officer or the first arriving engine, let them take command. It doesn't have to be an officer, because they're like I said, they're never going to get the experience. And it for me, where I see more of a prevalent experience, but more of a prevalent example of it is when they start being able to talk on the radio and they're not really as clear, or they don't know what to say, and it's like, well, why don't you? And it's like, well, Christ, man, you're the one that had the radio the whole time, firmly pressed to your mouth, and I can't get any experience to use the right phrases or say the right words or ask the right questions. But no, that's, like I said, humility is something that is huge. It's part of the passionate leader creed, and it's something that I think a lot of people who are passionate, I think humility sort of does come hand in hand with that. Sometimes passion can override. I'm a firm advocate that being passionate can sometimes clog your filters, and you can step on your anatomy sometimes if you're not careful with it. And I know I have. I've had some serious experiences, some growth curves and learning experiences. So what is one thing that you felt you did that was a step in the right direction that left the fire service better than when you joined?
I would say, I mean, the complete rebuild of our department. When I joined our department, we, I don't think we were trusted or respected by surrounding towns. And this is my terminology, not anybody else's, but we were the cover truck fire department. We didn't really go to other people's scenes.
Yep.
And that was one of the things that I am everything I do in life, whether it's coaching sports, whatever, I am a huge self-reflecting person, and you got to reflect on why things are happening. And that was something that always bothered me on the department. And so when I took over, it was a self-evaluation of our department of why do we not go to these scenes? Why do we sit in their station every time? And I looked at the training that we did, and I was like, we could be better at training. We could be way better at training. And that was one of the things when I was hired as the chief. I had gone to the town and said, this is going to cost money if you want me to be chief, we need to be better. We need to be a lot better. And they support it. And we started bringing in outside training. We send people to training. My God, when I was there, and I think they're probably still doing it, but I sent a crew to California to specialized training every single year, for the different things that we branched off into throughout the department. But we went from being what I call the cover truck department to basically being everybody's first due engine in the area. We ended up being, I would say, probably one of the most respected departments in southern Vermont. And nothing's ever good enough for me. So once that mission was accomplished, I said, okay, well, how can we make things even better? And decided to start getting into specialized trainings. And right about that time that mindset had started with me was when Hurricane Irene happened. And we're Chester. You have the Williams River. Nothing's ever going to happen here. There hasn't been a flood here in 100 years. Well, Chester ended up becoming an island during Irene. And not only did we not have the support and the things that we did to rescue people, whereas like day one of swiftwater rescue training don't do. So I decided, you know what, we're going to put together a water rescue team. And I got huge pushback from the town. But I got funding for it, so the town didn't have to pay for the setup costs of it. And we established that, and over the years got better and better and better to where a few years ago we are now a state resource. We have an MOU with the state, and the state utilizes us almost every single flood, whether it's in Chester or not. The crews were in Waterbury last year. They've been up into all the northern part counties that flooded last year, Barry and everywhere else. So seeing the capabilities of what we have, and that I keep saying I still have a hard time remembering that I'm retired, that they are a state resource that gets utilized very often, is a great accomplishment of where the department was and where it is now.
No, it speaks wonders, and honestly, I think it doesn't surprise me there wasn't pushback, but I honestly feel like that region of Vermont is literally where all the crap just flows. It's like it's the septic tank of Vermont. Everything flows into Chester lately as far as water, and you always see on social media that the department's being deployed or it's activated, and I mean it could go anywhere. And honestly, I think one thing that is neat for the listeners to understand is Chester's a volunteer department, and you were able to pull this off with 100% volunteer fire department that it still is.
No, actually, it's not anymore. Chester is a paid department.
Yes, sorry. With the paid on call, correct?
What's that?
It's a paid on call department.
Yeah, so they're the majority of the staff is paid call, and then they're attempting to have a full-time chief now, but they for the money that gets paid out, it might as well be full-time for the hours that they put in.
Yeah, for sure. And but nonetheless, so I know a lot of departments, the word volunteer always gets thrown out. I don't really think that there's many that actually are, zero pay, but nonetheless, for the crumbs that a lot of people get paid or compensated for, the ability that you were able to get for the guys and girls to build that team, it speaks wonders, because I don't know if there's any of the other local regional departments that have the capabilities that Chester does, but Chester's always going somewhere. You're probably gonna be one of the only departments that'll actually have trucks that will age out based on mileage, not on years, right, on the apparatus.
Well, we got so it was almost a year to the date that the pushback stopped. So 1 year after Irene, we got hit again. Even though it wasn't going to happen for another 100 years, it happened almost exactly a year to the date that Chester got hit again, and I never got pushed back again after that.
Does it always works that way? There's always that one resident that's like, "Ah, we don't need this truck," or a select board member that's like, "You don't really need this," and all of a sudden, like, "Oh, I really wish you had that resource that I said no to." And it's an unfortunate way to be humbled, but it's certainly a delicious piece of the humble pie sometimes to see get eaten.
Yep.
So, so working. What was the next question here? My gosh, I got to work this better. What is, if you had to, if you have any, do you have any regrets from your time that you want to share with the listeners that we can learn to avoid from, or, basically to, teach those listening what we should avoid, or what, learn from your mistakes, I guess. As PC
That's
as
a really
possible.
hard question for me because I try not to look at life with regrets. I try to look
Fair
at
enough.
everything from learning points. I I don't. That's a really hard question for me. I mean, yeah, mistakes were made, but I don't know if I'd ever call them regrets. I think they were all teaching moments, and
Sure.
I mean, it's not really a regret. I wish there would have been a way to keep the Explorer program going longer. That was out of my control. There started to be lack of interest from the school and the rules that the Boy Scouts had and things like that. But I I don't like mission failure, and that at the end I kind of feel is a failure because I wasn't able to come up
Sure.
with a way to save the program. And I loved that program. It was a ton of extra work. But the people that we got involved with it loved the program, and it was it was hard to have the buy-in. It took years to get the complete buy-in of the program, and then to
Yep.
finally reach that goal to probably have at least 75%, maybe even 90% buy-in from the department, to then not have the juvenile interest to keep the program going, was a tough pill to swallow.
No, and it is unfortunate. I think it's definitely hard to see some, like, something very successful like that. But I mean, understand that, the few lives that you had an implement on, we were working our ways to kind of figure out some ways to kind of get, reignite that youth fire. So you got promoted, obviously, to fire chief, and with any change, there's going to be some haters. There's going to be some over in the corner barking and whining, and some are going to leave. And truthfully, those are people that I consider a bottom feeder. If they leave because of a person who's put into place, they're not really there for the mission. It's not a mission mindset. It's a personal agenda, and whether it be a personality conflict or not, some people just don't have the ability to look at it from, that we're here for the citizens that we serve, not the person who's at the top of the chain. How did you handle that resistance, and then what did you do to kind of mend any fences for those that were a little upset but still stuck around?
So within the first 4 weeks of me taking over, and I had talked with the town manager and told them this was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen, and I was prepared for it. I knew of at least 4 people that were going to walk, and not because I got not because I got hired as the chief, but because of the rules that I was about ready to put in place and strictly enforce. And it happened. I think one person left within the first 2 weeks, and the other three were gone within four. And I remember people on the department going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And I said, "We're going to get better." And they're like, "Well, these are 4 people that come to all of our calls." And I said, "Yeah, and our attitude sucks here." I said, "Give this 6 months and let's see what happens." I said, "Don't panic." I said, "Things that they did that nobody else did, well, everybody else should have been trained on that stuff anyway. Why were we relying on a couple of people?"
Mm-hmm.
Complete turnaround of the attitude and comfortableness within the department. The amount of people that came to me afterwards and was like, "Oh my God, this is such a calmer, like there's no tension here." Those people, whether they knew it or not, were making people nervous and was causing tension within the department. And yeah, did we lose some valuable years experience? Absolutely we did. but what we gained with people being comfortable, we had people on or people that rejoined the department that had left, over the years. They had left prior to me ever being there, because of the tension that they felt there and just were uncomfortable, and it wasn't fun for them, and things weren't happening. We had those people that were coming back. I know of a couple that are still on the department right now that had left for years because they were uncomfortable. So, sometimes, I always go back to the movie Speed. Sometimes you got to shoot a hostage. And you got to weigh, the pros and cons and what the outcome's going to be. And the 3 months or whatever it was of being a few people down, to 6 months after that being quite a few people up. And like I said at the beginning of the show, our roster looked great when I joined. I think there was 30 something people on it, but you had 8 that showed up. I'd rather have 22 people on my roster and have 20 of them showing up all the time. And that's
Right.
what it turned into.
No, so it's former chief that I used to work under. He classified the department as having 3 engine companies: the no shows, the so-sos, and the gung hos. And honestly, it's unfortunate because the ones at the bottom can sometimes infect those at the top. And it's got to be the other way around. So this kind of is a good transition to the next question. Is obviously there is a recruitment and retention problem in the fire service. There's nothing that we can probably, that there is no magic ball, because if there was, somebody would have already figured out what that potion is. What is one thing that you feel is either contributing to the retention or the recruiting problem? And if you had the time the time and the ability to get back into it, what would you try to do to fix it?
So you can't do the day in, day out every single day. People get bored in their jobs. It doesn't have to be the fire service. It can be any job. And, or not even a job. It could just be your hobbies or whatever. You got to somehow make it exciting. And the things that I did to recruit and retention, and I would say probably more retention than recruiting, but it did help both, was training and what they were able to do. There was a select board member who all the department heads hated going to select board meetings because they didn't want to deal with this one select board member. And he never bothered me. Was he a pain? Yeah, he was a pain. But you had to sell him your product. You had to tell him why your product was good. And the funding that I used to try to get to send people to trainings or to bring specialized people in to train our people, he was instantly against it. And he fought me in that select board meeting and fought me and fought me and fought me. And so I talked to him about recruiting and retention. I said, you ever get bored in your job? I said, if I spend $1,000 on 2 people to go to this training that they're never, ever probably going to use in our department or in the town of Chester, but I get to keep them for 10 to 20 years on the department, well, $1,000 is a small price to pay for retention and keeping those people here and keeping them excited in their job. And he actually apologized to me and said, I never thought about it. That is money well spent. You have my vote for this. So I think sometimes you got to think outside the box of, does the town or the department actually need this? Maybe yes, maybe no, hopefully never. But if it keeps the people excited and loving their job and wanting to be there, then sometimes you got to spend a little money in training to keep things fresh and keep people going. Because if I bring people in and make them climb a ladder and crawl around with an air pack on every single training that we do, well, they're going to get bored and they're going to move on to something else that excites them. So you got to keep the people excited and keep them wanting to come there. So you got to spend money in training, and you can't always just train on the things that you're going to use. You got to train on things that you think you might use, or maybe you're never going to use it, but it keeps them excited.
Ah, dude, I love it. It's the concept of investing in your people that I love it. Dude, I think I got maybe one more question and that's it. So, what is one mentorship trait, trick, or characteristic that carried you through the service?
You got to find you got to find the line of being the leader and being the friend. And especially in the fire service, it's a very tight knit group. There's a lot of pride. Um, the term brother and sisters is always used, and I think that goes beyond just a term. That is a true statement. A fire department and a well run fire department is a family. And you have to get your crew to trust you enough that they understand the difference of flicking the light switch. It's time to work versus time to be in a friend. You might be at my house last night having a beer with me, but tomorrow morning when the bell goes off, it's time to work. And the crew used to laugh at me or whatever when something bad would happen or whatever. Always seems like in the service it always revolves around directing traffic, because after 4 hours someone loses their cool and isn't the nicest to someone, and says something to someone they shouldn't have said after being irritated for 4 hours. But I used to say to them all the time, after I'd get called into the town manager's office, which meant I had to go and have a meeting with them, is I really hate it when you guys make me be the chief. We had a well-oiled machine that went on there, and it was very few times that I had to be the chief in a day-to-day operation. I trusted my crew. I knew what they were capable of. I knew what they could do. I knew I didn't have to be there. But they wanted me to be there. Which was a great line that I had made with the occasional, my God, you're making me be a fire chief today. Like, there has to be discipline today, or you gotta knock off the grab ass, and we gotta put our helmets on and go to work. So finding that line and making sure your crew knows that there's that line. Everyone's gonna screw up in this job at some point in time. You got to own it. You got to take your licks and drive on afterwards. And I think you have to get your crew comfortable enough to know that just because I may have, got my ass handed to me a little bit at a call, doesn't mean that you and I aren't going to go out and have a beer tonight and talk about all the good times that we've had in the past. And if your crew doesn't know that about you, then I think it could snowball into, they can't let that one moment go. And they got to know that in this service, it's a high stress job. There's going to be moments, and you have to take it and drive on.
No, that's awesome. I mean, now did you get any? A lot of people, honestly. So I think good leaders can figure out the light switch between buddy and boss, but sometimes I don't think the crew can pick up on that. Do you ever have any hard times with guys not really understanding that this, it's not playtime anymore? It's pretty serious time, or did the members kind of figure that out pretty quickly for you?
I think most people figure it out pretty quickly. I think every department's got that one or two that just don't get it.
Sure.
That you
Yep.
feel like you have to talk to all the time, which makes it hard, because I think sometimes those people feel like they're being targeted.
Yeah.
And
Of course.
the conversation that I would always have with them was, I'm sorry you feel this way, but can you step back for a minute, watch what other people are doing? You're not the only one that's getting spoken to, but when they get spoken to, they change their action, and we get to move on. I'm the person that always thinks that, if you're constantly being spoken to about something, maybe it's not the other people. Maybe it's time to self-reflect of what you're doing. If you're always
Yeah.
getting talked about the
Yep.
same thing. So I think every department's got those one or two people that it's not going to happen. It's going to be a problem for you every time. It doesn't mean they're a bad firefighter. It doesn't mean they're a bad person or anything like that. They just have a hard time grasping that light switch of when to turn it on, turn it off.
Awesome, dude. No true words. Listen, that's all I got. I know that you have a serious long ride ahead of you up to the state of Maine for work. So I got to thank you for giving me your Monday morning to get this taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, this is JP, the Passionate Leader. If you like what we had today, stick around. There's going to be more guests. If you want to be a guest, or if you know somebody, if you have a fire service giant that you think would be a good guest for the show, please send them my way. It's the Passionate Leader Podcast at gmail.com. Look for us on Instagram, The Passionate Leader, Facebook, The Passionate Leader, and TikTok, The Passionate Leader. Again, the Passionate Leader Podcast is probably the easiest way to get hold of us through Gmail to get us who we need for some guests. If you want to be on the show, please let me know. I'll shoot you some questions and an intake form that I have. But without further ado, guys, this is the episode. This is my absolute honor to have my childhood mentor, my fire service giant, retired Fire Chief Matt Wilson from the Chester Vermont Fire Department, who has taught me to lead by the Passionate Leader credo, and that is lead with passion, serve with humility, and leave no room for bottom feeders. Till next time, guys.